Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. War is not glory in the 41st millennium. It is not a path to honor, nor a chance for redemption. It is the endless churn of souls ground to ash in the gears of a dying galaxy. Across 1,000,000 battlefields on 1,000,000 worlds, soldiers fall screaming, not always to death, but to something worse, the shattering of body and identity, the slow decay of purpose beneath rotting flesh and failed machinery. Injury in the grim darkness of the far future is not a momentary setback. It is often a final destination. There is no Geneva Convention, no medevac flights or humanitarian corridors. In Warhammer 40k, the wounded are reminders of the Imperium's indifference, Chaos's cruelty, and Xeno's alienness. The fortunate are killed outright. The less fortunate are patched together with tubes, bolts, and prayers, cast back into the fire with one eye missing and a soul already half gone. And the truly cursed? They linger. In pain, in madness, in the cold, forgotten corners of a universe that has no time or pity for broken things. The life of a guardsman is one of ash, blood, and bureaucratic disregard. In the Imperium of Man, the Astra Militarum fields its soldiers like ammunition, spent in trillions across countless battlefronts. To be injured as a guardsman is not a gateway to honor or rest, but a statistical inconvenience. An obstacle to the Imperial war machine's unrelenting momentum. The average soldier does not receive battlefield triage under the glow of high-tech Medicaid equipment. If there is help, it comes in the form of a hurried field dressing, a whispered prayer, and the indifferent shove of a superior demanding the wounded keep moving. For many, the injury is the beginning of their disappearance. A leg severed by shrapnel? Krull. An arm burned to the bone by a plasma discharge? Bite down and reload with your teeth. There is no systematic recovery effort. There is no organized casualty extraction. Medical support is a rare luxury, typically reserved for officers, commissars, or those whose usefulness has not yet expired. Wounded guardsmen are expected to die well, or if they live, to continue serving in any capacity, however diminished. There are whispered jokes among guardsmen about being turned into servitors or being conscripted into the penal legions. But the laughter never lasts long. Injured soldiers who can no longer fight may be sent to casualty stations, grim locales packed with the dying, the screaming, and the forgotten. These aren't hospitals in any sense a modern mind might understand. They are little more than temporary shelters, sometimes tents, sometimes repurposed ruins, overseen by overworked Medicaid and guard administrative scribes whose concern lies not with life, but with accurate accounting. Men and women are lined up, tagged, and treated with whatever is available. Anesthetic is rare, antiseptic non-existent. Limbs are hacked away not for health but to prevent the spread of corruption. Morphine? That's a drug for nobles. A guardsman is lucky to receive a mouthful of Amasec before the saw. Those too wounded to return to service may find themselves euthanized. The process is clinical, emotionless. Administrative protocols designate how long a wounded soldier can remain on a casualty list before they are declared non-viable. The decision isn't made by doctors, it's made by logisticians, by supply officers balancing rations against utility. Some commissars oversee the mercy killings personally, others delegate it to junior officers, or even servo skulls programmed for termination. Death in these cases is delivered not out of pity but efficiency. There are, however, darker fates. Some wounded are spirited away not to die, but to serve anew. A guardsman who survives grievous injury might be pressed into servitude as a lobotomized servitor, his mind wiped, his body rebuilt with crude augmetics. These former warriors may find themselves loading munitions, fueling tanks, or operating as living components in grim machinery. Others are conscripted into the penal legions, forcibly rearmed and thrown into suicidal assaults. Injured but breathing? Then you can still die usefully. For the rare few, there is elevation. A guardsman who distinguishes themselves through resilience and pain might be inducted into the ranks of the Militarum Tempestus, or selected for augmentation by the Adeptus Mechanicus. These are exceptions so rare they verge on myth. For most, valor earns only another chance to die on a different world, in another hopeless battle. Then there is the spiritual cost. The ecclesiarchy teaches that suffering is sacred, that pain is the emperor's test. Wounded soldiers are paraded before shrines, expected to confess not their fear, but their failure to die in the emperor's service. Chaplains may bless them, yes, but it is not uncommon for the broken to be reminded that their wounds are burdens to the Imperium, and that only sacrifice redeems the weak. The faith becomes a weapon, another tool of control, ensuring that even agony serves the throne. There is no rest for the injured in the guard. There is no honor in surviving. Survival itself is a mark of suspicion. Were you cowardly? Did you falter in your duty? Why did the Emperor not take you? These questions echo in the minds of the broken, long after the battle has ended, long after their blood has dried on some forgotten rock in the void. In the end, the injured guardsman is not a symbol of courage. He is a cautionary tale, a warning to those still whole: fight harder, die quicker, and never become one of the limping ghosts that haunt the fringes of the front line. When a Space Marine falls in battle, it is not merely a wound to the flesh. It is a fracture in a relic of war, a biological miracle centuries in the making. Astartes are not men. They are weapons, genetically sculpted, ritualistically armored, and psychically hardened. And yet, even they bleed. Even they can be broken. But where a human's injury might mark the end of their usefulness, an Astartes wound is the beginning of a far more harrowing journey. Within the Apothecarian, there is no room for softness. The wounded are not coddled. There is no sentiment in the hands of the apothecary, only precision. Bones are reknit with autografts. Organs are regrown or harvested from the fallen. Missing limbs are replaced with bionics that fuse into the flesh with brutal efficiency. Pain is not dulled but embraced. To feel agony is proof the warrior still lives, still serves. The Emperor did not die so that his sons might lie idle in recovery. Every second spent in rest is a second the enemy breathes. So the wounded are driven, often forcibly, back to their feet. Yet there are limits. Some wounds go beyond even the apothecarian's sacred craft. When a Space Marine's body is too far gone, but his mind endures, there is one path left: interment within the sarcophagus of a dreadnought. A prison of adamantium and sarcophagus fluid, where the warrior sleeps between wars, dreaming of his living days. To be a dreadnought is not glory. It is eternal limbo. The senses dull. Time becomes abstract, emotions degrade. The warrior becomes something other, a relic, a ghost machine. Still revered, yes, still deadly beyond measure, but isolated from the brotherhood he once knew. A walking tomb wrapped in power and silence. For those not chosen for dreadnought duty, the fate can be less dignified. Disfigured Astartes may be left with permanent augmetics, not graceful Mechanicus replacements, but crude, rugged substitutes bolted into the bone. Their once proud visages become masks of pain and function. Some chapters revere these scars as marks of honor. Others treat them as quiet shame. There are Space Marines who live with only fragments of their former bodies, missing organs, half-faces, shattered lungs wheezing through servo assist. And yet they fight on because the Emperor demands it. Because death is not the end, only failure is. But perhaps the cruelest fate of all is reserved for those whose minds are broken while their bodies remain. And Astartes cannot falter in spirit. To lose faith, to give in to trauma, is to become a liability. Such warriors may be quietly removed from the ranks, sent to the reclusium for penance, or taken by the chaplains for what the Codex calls spiritual reorientation. No one speaks of what happens behind those sealed doors. Some return, hollow-eyed and silent. Others are never seen again. Different chapters treat the injured differently. The Space Wolves carry their wounded on their shoulders, singing battle hymns, seeing the scars as saga-worthy. The Blood Angels bury their pain beneath layers of nobility and art, even as they descend into madness. The Iron Hands do not see injury at all, only the opportunity to excise weakness with blessed steel. For the Black Templars, injury is yet another test of the Emperor's judgment. And for the Dark Angels, it is an opportunity to evaluate whether secrets have been kept or betrayed. None of it is healing, not truly. There is no post-traumatic care, no psychological restoration. Astartes are trained to suppress, endure, and if they cannot, to disappear. Their very nature forbids the luxury of trauma. They are conditioned to see pain as fuel and injury as a test of loyalty. There is no room for weakness in the gene code of gods. And yet, under the layers of ceramite, under the liturgies and the chanting and the machine-grafted limbs, they remain men. Men who once laughed, who once dreamed, however faintly. And when they are injured, those faint remnants flicker. Sometimes they are extinguished entirely. Other times they flare, desperate and defiant. A dying ember in a universe where the light is always fading. Astartes do not retire. They do not grow old. They do not heal in any sense a mortal might understand. They endure, and if endurance fails them, they are either entombed, exiled, or erased. The Emperor does not ask for wholeness, only obedience. In the flickering candlelight of a shattered chapel, amid incense smoke and the scent of scorched promethium, a sister of battle kneels, her body broken and bloodied. Her armor hangs in pieces from her shoulders, her wounds weep openly, yet her voice, cracked and ragged, sings still. This is not defiance, it is devotion. For the Adepta Sororitas, injury is more than a consequence of war. It is a sacred trial, a divine test imposed by the Emperor himself. To bleed in his name is to pray with one's own body. Where the Imperial Guard dies forgotten and the Astartes are rebuilt as weapons, the Sisters of Battle transform pain into sacrament. Each laceration, each shattered rib, is a page in their living hymn to the Emperor. Medicaid treatment exists, yes. Many orders hospitaller are skilled in battlefield triage and the arts of healing, but it is laced with ritual, encased in faith. A sister's wounds are not only stitched but anointed. Sacred oils mix with blood. Wounds are cauterized while litanies are chanted. Pain is not something to be dulled. It is something to be endured. To flinch under the blade is to insult the Emperor's trust. Some orders go further still. The Order's Dialogus may inscribe passages of the Imperial Creed directly into the skin of the wounded, turning their bodies into living scripture. Others, like the Order's Pronatus, embed relics into healed flesh, turning old wounds into sites of permanent worship. These sisters become walking reliquaries, their bodies holy in both suffering and symbol. In such acts, injury becomes elevation, proof that one's flesh is as devoted as one's soul. But not all wounds can be sanctified. Some sisters are maimed beyond even the Hospitaller's grace. Limbs turned to ash, faces ruined by acid, voices stolen by shrapnel. And yet, retreat is unthinkable. Sisters do not surrender to pain, they use it. Even crippled, they continue to serve. Many volunteer for martyrdom missions, knowing their deaths will inspire others. Some are interred within penitent engines, their agony magnified into madness. These wretched constructs tear through the battlefield howling psalms, their pilots screaming hymns of absolution, even as their broken forms are consumed by fire and steel. There are few fates in the galaxy as brutal as being wired into a penitent engine. It is not healing, it is punishment. And yet some sisters seek it willingly. Injury, in their minds, is not a reason to stop. It is the Emperor demanding more. That they survived means their suffering has not yet reached its full measure. So they step into the cage, embrace the agony anew, and let the machine burn the last of their flesh away in his name. For those who survive, scars are cherished. They are catalogued, remembered, and displayed with pride during rites of devotion. Some sisters carve their scars into religious symbols. Others wear them openly, refusing augmentation unless absolutely necessary. To be disfigured is not a source of shame. It is a badge of spiritual clarity. It means the Emperor saw them in the fire and allowed them to emerge reborn. Yet there is tragedy too. Behind the hymns and the faith lies something deeply human. The quiet moments in the cloisters, when a sister stares into the reflection of her broken body, when the litany fades and the pain becomes her own again, when the echoes of the battle are louder than the words of her canoness. In those silences the cost is known, and still she returns to war. Not because she has healed, but because she was never meant to. The sisterhood teaches that the Emperor speaks through fire and pain, that his light purifies. But the truth is more bitter. The Imperium does not allow these women to rest. They are not permitted to grieve, to falter, or to recover. Their injury is immediately repurposed, ritually, symbolically, tactically. They are kept in motion until they collapse, and even then, their remains are turned into relics. To be wounded is not to step away from the front. It is to be reforged, more devout, more dangerous, more ready to burn. Injury for the sororitas is not a deviation from their purpose. It is its ultimate expression. Pain is faith, blood is prayer. And healing? That is for those who have not yet proven themselves worthy of the Emperor's fire. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not mend the wounded. It does not offer healing. In the Cult Mechanicus, injury is not misfortune. It is opportunity. A tech priest who suffers damage to their biological form is not consoled or treated with sympathy. They are corrected, they are improved. Where flesh has failed, metal may succeed. Pain is irrelevant. Emotion is weakness. The wounded are not broken. They are inefficient, and inefficiency demands rectification. In the red-lit forge shrines of Mars and its myriad forge worlds, there is no such thing as a hospital. There are no waiting rooms, no recovery beds. Instead, there are surgical tables of cold steel, covered in the grime of centuries, where screaming organic matter is replaced by humming mechanisms. A damaged limb is not sutured, it is sawn off and replaced with a servo arm or a mechadendrite. Organs are excised wholesale and swapped with vat-grown cogitator cores. The flesh is not sacred, it is obsolete. To suffer injury as a tech adept is to embrace transcendence. Indeed, many senior members of the Mechanicus go so far as to engineer their own mutilations, creating conditions for further replacement. They do not wait for injury, they invite it. Because every scar carved by machinery is a step closer to the omnissiah. The flesh is fallible, the machine is perfect. When wounds occur, they are not seen as loss, but as the shedding of impurity. The Mechanicus has no empathy for pain. Its dogma demands the suppression of all emotional reactions, and many tech priests have had portions of their emotional centers removed or chemically silenced. When one is injured, there is no comfort. There is only recalibration. The Mechanicus maintains databanks of replacement procedures, prioritized by function and logical necessity. If a tech priest loses their eyes, they do not grieve. They install multi-spectrum optical arrays and thank the machine god for granting superior sight. This approach is not without consequence. Many tech priests lose all sense of bodily identity. The wounded among them often forget what it meant to feel, literally. Replaced nerve clusters mean they no longer register pain or pleasure or even temperature. They become cold constructs of flesh and iron, their minds clouded not by trauma, but by ever-expanding algorithmic thought patterns. Their injuries do not define them. Their augmentations do. And yet, deep within the data-shrouded recesses of their cogitator-enhanced minds, one must wonder if a faint echo of humanity remains, a flicker of remembrance of what it once meant to feel broken. There are divergent philosophies within the cult Mechanicus regarding injury and transformation. The more radical magi of the biologists and genitor orders may pursue bodily enhancement through biomechanical integration, while others in the Logi or Cybernetica schools prefer near-total digitization. Regardless of doctrine, the result is the same. The wounded are removed from the cycle of flesh and integrated into the ever-advancing machine. And for those too damaged, even for replacement, there is still use. A tech priest rendered cognitively unstable or structurally compromised may be repurposed into a servo skull, their brain preserved and wired into floating drone flesh. Others are reduced to the function of a control nexus for Mechanicus war gear, fused into thrones of circuitry, their voices long since silenced beneath binary prayers and pulsing machine code. The Mechanicus does not discard the broken. It reassigns them. Even in total ruin, there is utility, and in utility, there is worship. This stands in stark contrast to the Imperium's other arms. While the Guard euthanizes and the Astartes entomb, the Mechanicus recycles. There is no end, only iteration. Each wound, each severed arm or ruptured lung is an invitation to further surrender oneself to the Omnissiah's vision. To the outsider, this is horror, the stripping away of all that makes one human. To the tech priest, it is liberation. But even in the rust-choked corners of the Forge worlds, where injured bodies twitch under buzzsaws and data probes, some whisper that there is a limit. That the mind, no matter how augmented, can only endure so much transformation before it breaks, not with a scream, but with a silent flicker, lost amidst the noise of sacred code. That perhaps, beneath the layers of chrome and prayer, the truly wounded of the Mechanicus are not those who bleed, but those who have been so thoroughly repaired that they can no longer remember why they were whole to begin with. The Eldari are a people of deep sorrow and exquisite pain, and nowhere is this more apparent than in how they endure injury. Where the Imperium casts its wounded aside or reforges them into machines, the Eldar treat every wound as a wound to the soul. Their bodies are delicate compared to humanity's brutish resilience, but their minds are sharp, owned, and psychically reactive. Injury for them is not only physical, it is spiritual dissonance, a violent break in the harmony of their being. When an Eldari warrior is struck down, the pain ripples through their psychic aura like a cracked gemstone. It is not a solitary experience. On the battlefield, each death or wound echoes among their kind, carried on the tenuous threads of their collective psychic resonance. The wounded do not suffer in silence. They are mourned in real time, their pain reflected in the minds of their kin, their injuries becoming part of a shared emotional landscape. This sensitivity makes treatment both urgent and harrowing. Bonesingers, those gifted in both psychic manipulation and healing craft, are called upon to mend the wounded. They weave wraithbone like a second skin, knitting bone and sinew, while singing songs of restoration. Yet even in this healing, there is melancholy. Every stitch is a memory. Every healed nerve is a reminder of what was lost. The Eldari do not believe in moving past pain. They believe in understanding it, bearing it, and remembering. But some wounds are too deep, even for their art. When an Eldari's spirit stone is damaged, or when psychic trauma threatens to shatter their soul, the consequences are profound. Unlike humans who might retreat into madness or cold silence, the Eldari risk being devoured by she who thirsts. Injury becomes not just a mortal danger, but a metaphysical gamble. If they die without their soul being captured by a spirit stone, they are lost forever to Slaanesh. This fear haunts every wounded warrior. To lie dying, spirit stone cracked, and feel the demonic pull of the warp is a torment few can fathom. This is why some Eldari, especially among the craft worlds, prefer to die outright than linger in wounded agony. There is honor in a clean death. There is terror in being broken and psychically vulnerable. Some warriors choose to end their own lives if they believe their wounds are too grievous, not from despair, but from duty, to deny the enemy their soul. In the case of the Wraithguard and Wraithlords, the dead are not simply gone. Their spirits are interred within wraithbone constructs, powered by psychically active material and guided by living seers. But for the wounded who live, they often return changed, not merely physically altered, but emotionally scarred. Their path becomes unstable. Many must leave the Aspect Warrior temples, their discipline shattered. Others take up new masks, new paths, hoping to find balance again. The Drakari, by contrast, injury in a twisted parody of this sacred process. For the dark kin of Camorra, pain is pleasure, and wounding is an art form. Injury is not feared, it is cultivated. They slice and flay and graft, not to heal but to enhance sensation. For the Drakari, every wound is a song of agony that staves off the predations of Slaanesh. They must consume suffering to survive, and thus even their own wounds feed their hunger. Homunculi surgeons do not mend with empathy. They sculpt flesh with cruelty, reshaping warriors into beautiful monstrosities. To be wounded in Drakari culture is not shameful. It is proof that one has truly lived. Still, whether Craftworlder or Drakari, the fate of the wounded Eldari is always tied to the soul. Flesh can heal or be replaced, but a soul torn by trauma? That leaves scars that cannot be seen, yet are felt across generations. In a race teetering on the brink of extinction, every injury is a tragedy. Every limp, every tremor, every flinch from the brush of wraithbone, it all speaks of how close they are to vanishing. And yet, they fight. They endure the pain, not because they are commanded, but because they understand what is at stake. The survival of their kind, their history, their artistry, their sorrows. Every wounded Eldari carries the memory of 1,000,000 dead cousins, 1,000,000 burning craft worlds, and the endless howl of Slaanesh at their heels. To bleed is to remember. To survive is to resist. To an orc, injury is not a crisis. It's a laugh, a mark of fun, maybe even a badge of honor. Pain, after all, is for lesser species. In the brutal and ridiculous world of the greenskin, getting blown apart and stitched back together by a half-mad pain boy is just another Tuesday. The concept of a wounded orc barely exists because the line between alive and dead is hilariously blurred. If you're not gibbering or on fire, you're good to go. And even if you are on fire, you might still be fighting. Orcs have a physiology that defies logic and mockingly spits in the face of medical science. Their bodies are a mishmash of fungus, muscle, and pure brute stubbornness. They can survive wounds that would kill a dozen humans. An orc can lose an arm, a leg, an eye, and still be swinging a choppa and yelling "wag" like nothing happened. Their regenerative capabilities are grotesquely effective, allowing them to regrow damaged tissue, sometimes even entire limbs, over time. But more often, they don't wait. They just bolt on a crude metal replacement, or better yet, tear a limb off another orc and use that instead. Enter the Pain Boy, the orc equivalent of a surgeon/mechanic/torture enthusiast. Pain Boys don't heal, they fix. Their methods are unspeakable. Saw blades, clamps, hammers, and pliers, tools of healing, orc style. Sedatives? Absolutely not. Clean instruments? Filthier the better. Success is measured not in hygiene or reduced suffering, but in how loud the patient yells and whether they walk away with more parts than they came in with. Orcs don't scream in protest. They scream in joy. Or maybe just to compete with the noise of the power drill boring into their ribcage. Injury is not just tolerated in orc society, it's normalized. Expected. Celebrated. An orc with a missing jaw and one eye is probably a knob by now, respected for having clearly been in some epic scraps. Those with obvious scars, replacement limbs, or crude mechanical implants become walking tales of battle. Their wounds are like living tattoos, each one a story told in bruises and rusted bolts. There's no shame in being torn up, only in not fighting hard enough to get there. Some orcs become so injured, so cobbled together with parts and plates, that they practically become walking tanks. It's not uncommon for a knob to have a mechanical claw where an arm used to be, half a dozer blade grafted to their chest, and metal spikes jammed into their skull just for the look. This is not a hindrance. This is the pinnacle of orc evolution. The more bits they've got, the more dangerous they look. And that's what really matters. Orcs don't believe in weakness. If an orc survives, they're strong. If they don't, well, they were probably a grot in disguise. There's a kind of brutish meritocracy at work. Survival through violence, respect through scars. And even if they do die from their wounds, orc beliefs hold that they'll come back in the next big wah, or they'll be stomped into the ground and fertilize more orcs. Either way, the cycle continues. Even the very concept of medics is weaponized in orc society. Pain Boys carry surgical tools that double as melee weapons. Field amputations often involve just biting off the damaged limb. Recovery time is measured in minutes. If you can still hold your shuta, you're fine. If not, the Pain Boy will weld it to your other arm or your forehead. Problem solved. And if you die, good news, more parts for someone else. There's a dark comedy to it all, a grotesque parody of medicine. But underneath it is something unsettling. Orcs do not care for each other. They do not nurture the wounded. Their entire society is a loop of violence and crude renewal. There is no rest, no sanctuary, no moment of compassion. You heal by fighting. You die by not fighting hard enough. Pain is irrelevant. Only the whack matters. And so the injured orc limps back into the fray, arms stitched on backwards, chest stapled shut, laughing madly as he throws himself once more into the carnage, not because he was healed, but because he never really stopped. Tyranids do not suffer injury. They do not understand it. To be wounded for a Tyranid is not a matter of survival or pain. It is a deviation from function. And in the hive mind, deviation is not tolerated. Every Tyranid creature, from the smallest ripper to the towering Hierophant Biotitan, is a node in a vast, consuming intelligence. They are not individuals. They are living tools. When one is broken, it is either repaired, reabsorbed, or discarded. The Tyranid biology is a miracle of bioengineering. Their bodies are not designed with healing in mind, but with relentless purpose. Damage is mitigated on the battlefield through rapid regeneration, a trait programmed into many biomorph strains. Flesh reknits, bone regrows, and even missing limbs can be replaced mid-battle with grotesque bursts of cellular acceleration. For lesser organisms, this would be agony. For Tyranids, it is simply a recalibration of biomass toward optimal function. But when damage is too severe, the hive mind responds with brutal efficiency. Severely wounded organisms are often repurposed before they even fall. Their biomass is redirected, recycled through feeder tendrils or devourer beasts. A wounded hormigaunt may be torn apart by its own kin, and its material immediately integrated into the surrounding swarm. There is no mourning, no triage, only resource management. Wounds do not evoke sympathy, they invite consumption. In some cases, especially among more complex bioforms like warriors, lictors, or tyrants, the hive mind may choose to preserve the damaged specimen for adaptation. These wounded creatures are drawn back behind the front lines by synaptic creatures or harvesting drones. There, within the dark, chitinous chambers of the reclamation pits, their flesh is broken down into genetic slurry. Their memories, reflexes, and adaptations are catalogued, digested into the living libraries of the hive fleets. A tyrannid does not die in the conventional sense. Its failure becomes information. Its pain becomes data. Sometimes what returns from these reclamation pits is not the same creature. It is a mutation, a hybrid, a new design. A warrior wounded by fire might become resistant to heat. A ravener crushed by heavy ordnance might be reborn with reinforced exoskeletons. The hive mind is the ultimate utilitarian predator. It learns from every wound. The injured are not liabilities, they are opportunities for evolution. And yet, in all this, there is a kind of horror that transcends biology. The tyrannids are so alien, so devoid of empathy, that their reaction to injury becomes a form of existential terror. Imagine being wounded in war, and instead of help, your comrades devour you for parts. Not out of cruelty, but because it is logical, efficient. Your suffering is simply the hive's investment returning in another form. This cold pragmatism extends to the larger bioconstructs as well. The mighty carnifex, if damaged beyond use, is dragged into digestion pools and rendered into the raw soup that fuels the next generation of horrors. The flying harpies, torn from the sky, are stripped of usable organs and their wings fed into spore chimneys. Even hive tyrants, the supposed leaders of the swarm, are not immune. If they fail, their bodies are dissolved, their minds, mere echoes, absorbed into the next gestalt upgrade. There is no wounded veteran among the tyrannids, no elder warriors bearing the scars of ancient wars. There is no memory of past pain, only the DNA of past utility. Each iteration is a blank slate, carrying only the instinctual memories deemed valuable by the hive mind. All others are discarded like spent shell casings. And what of psychic wounds? The hive mind itself cannot be harmed in the way a soul can. It is a tidal wave of intent, a vast mental presence that crushes individuality. But when portions of its swarm are cut off, blinded by warp storms or psychic interference, those bioforms may become erratic, even suicidal. Some flail and collapse. Others lash out mindlessly, no longer guided by the will that made them coherent. These moments, brief though they are, reveal that tyrannids are not immune to the consequences of isolation. Wounded not in flesh, but in connection. Ultimately, to be wounded as a tyrannid is to be repurposed. If the body can be fixed, it will be. If it cannot, it will be consumed. If the data is valuable, it will be retained. If not, it will be erased. There is no self to save, no identity to protect. Injury is merely a state of inefficiency awaiting correction. The hive mind does not grieve, it devours. The servants of chaos know pain in ways the loyalist minds of the Imperium cannot fathom. To be wounded in service to the dark gods is not a punishment, it is a promise, a prelude to transformation. Among the traitor legions, the cultists, the demon-bound, and the heretics, injury is rarely the end. It is the gateway to something far worse or far greater. The first thing to understand is that chaos does not value consistency. It values change, mutation, flux. When a follower of chaos is wounded, the wound becomes a crucible, a test. Will it fester into corruption? Will it draw the attention of a demon prince? Will the flesh warp into something glorious or grotesque? Every injury is a prayer, a risk, a bargain made in torn skin and weeping sores. Some are blessed with immediate recovery, not through surgery, but through demonic intervention. Flesh that should be gone regrows in seconds, sprouting writhing tentacles or chitinous plating. Bone bursts through skin, eyes multiply, screams become song. For these lucky or unlucky souls, the pain is transmuted into euphoria, their wounds becoming icons of chaos's favor. Others are less fortunate. Their injuries rot. Their souls are deemed weak. A Chaos Space Marine who falters might find his genocide liquefying inside his chest, his mind unraveling into a frothing madness. A wounded heretic may be cast into the pits by their warband, torn apart by their own possessed gear, or simply forgotten until the warp consumes them. Among the forces of chaos, there is no triage, no healing rites, only ascension or oblivion. In the Eye of Terror, warbands sometimes maintain apothecaries or medic equivalents, often twisted parodies of the imperial model. These flesh rites, or pain binders, don't heal so much as experiment. They might bolt on new limbs harvested from the dead or inject warp serums that rewrite a warrior's anatomy. Some even flay their patients open and stitch in daemon organs, believing it will make them more resilient. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it ends in spontaneous combustion and a hole in the hull. For the cults of Nurgle, injury is worship. Wounds are not healed, they are nurtured. They blossom into filth, into glorious decay. Pus-filled abscesses become marks of pride. Maggots are seen as sacred companions. A plague marine may have been wounded countless times, but his rotting bulk endures. Not because he was repaired, but because his pain was sanctified. He cannot feel, cannot suffer, because his nerves are dead and his soul is drowning in grandfather's love. By contrast, the servants of Slaanesh exalt in injury for its sensation. Pain is their ecstasy, and mutilation is merely an indulgence. Wounded noise marines scream praises as their flesh is carved anew. Some wield weapons that damage them as much as their foes, because each blow is another thrill, another note in the symphony of excess. For the devotees of Tzeentch, injury is another thread in the tapestry of manipulation. A wound might be an illusion, or it might cause a transformation so profound that the wounded becomes unrecognizable. One moment a mortal, the next a nine-limbed sorceress chimera, howling forbidden truths through mouths that did not exist the day before. Wounds become catalysts for change, often unpredictable and irreversible. And Khorne? Khorne cares not from where the blood flows. A wounded berserker fights harder. Limbs lost are ignored. Bones broken are used as clubs. If a Khorne worshipper can still draw breath, they can kill. And if they can kill, they have value. Wounds are mere distractions. Some warriors intentionally wound themselves before battle as offerings to the blood god, gouging flesh, slicing tongues, shattering their own knuckles. All for favor. All for rage. There are also the damned, the chaos spawn. Warriors whose injuries and mutations have gone too far, whose minds have collapsed under the weight of corruption. They become writhing heaps of madness, dragged behind warbands in cages or hurled at the enemy like rabid animals. These beings were once proud, once strong, but injury and chaos's gifts twisted them beyond salvation. Their fate is a warning to all who seek the favor of the dark gods. Injury in their service is never neutral. It either exalts or consumes. The fate of the wounded in chaos is as mutable as chaos itself. You might wake up stronger, inhumanly beautiful, and demonic. Or you might never wake up at all, your soul lost to the madness of the warp. There is no care, no mercy, only the raw calculus of the gods. Your wounds speak, and what they say determines whether you rise as a prince or slither as a beast. The Necrons do not bleed. They do not scream, but they suffer. To witness a Necron wounded is to watch a nightmare of silence and steel. There is no cry of agony, no desperate plea for help, only the grinding sound of ancient metal scraping against itself as broken limbs twitch back into place. But beneath that cold exterior, within that soulless shell, is a consciousness that remembers. A mind trapped in a prison it neither chose nor understands. For the Necrons, injury is not physical pain. It is the existential torment of immortality in decay. Their bodies, forged from living necrodermis, repair themselves with eerie precision. Damaged plating knits back together in seconds. Shattered limbs reassemble like clockwork puppets. Some even vanish in a shimmer of green light, only to reappear deep within a tomb complex, regenerated by ancient protocols that predate humanity's first fire. The wounded Necron does not wait for medics. It is its own doctor, its own repair unit, its own undertaker. But this efficiency masks a deeper tragedy. Many Necrons retain fragments of the personalities they once had as Necrontire. Some remember who they were, some remember what they lost. When a Necron is damaged in battle, it is not just the shell that is broken, it is the mind inside that fractures further. Each wound is another reminder that they are no longer truly alive. They do not heal, they restore. There is a difference. One is a return to health. The other is the reinforcement of an eternal stasis. Not all Necrons are equal in this. The higher-ranking lords and overlords often retain vast portions of their pre-biotransference identities. When they are injured, their suffering is not physical but intellectual. Humiliation, the indignity of being reduced to sparking wires and seared plating. These beings remember what it was to feel, to command respect, to possess dignity. Injury strips that away. Some rage, some go quiet. A wounded Necron lord may descend into eerie catatonia, staring blankly as systems reboot around the core of a soul that no longer understands what it has become. There are those who break entirely. The flayed ones are perhaps the most grotesque result of psychic injury among the Necrons. Though not traditionally wounded, they are cursed with a hunger for flesh and a madness born from an error in the biotransference process. One might interpret this as a form of soul trauma, a metaphysical wound so deep it warped the entire being. These Necrons claw at the living, not out of strategy, but out of some tormented echo of a life lost. It is not battlefield damage, but the injury of identity. Other damaged Necrons become lost, their programming corrupted by centuries of exposure to the warp or environmental degradation. These broken units roam battlefields alone, attacking friend and foe alike, or simply wandering the void in a state of silent despair. Technically functional, yes, but damaged in ways no cryptech can repair. Some cryptechs attempt to heal the damaged minds of their kin, experimenting with mnemonic restoration or the reintegration of personality shards. The success rate is minimal. Often the result is a catastrophic mental loop or emotional regression that ends with the Necron's shutdown or irreversible malfunction. And yet the cryptechs persist, because somewhere, deep in the logical mind of the Necron race, there is still a flicker of longing for what they once were. And yet injury, in the strategic sense, is rarely permanent for them. Resurrection protocols allow many Necrons to simply phase out of battle when critically damaged, returning later fully rebuilt. But they come back wrong sometimes. Their gait irregular, their voice fractured, their gaze distant. The Imperium believes Necrons are cold machines, but those who have studied them closely know better. They are haunted, not by ghosts, but by memory. Every injury deepens the scar of eternal undeath. There is no valor in being wounded for the Necron. There is no praise, no promotion, no camaraderie. There is only another step in an infinite march toward an end that never comes. Their bodies repair, their minds degrade. The Necrons are not fearless because they lack pain. They are fearless because they know the horror of eternity, and every wound is a reminder that they cannot escape it. In the Tau Empire, injury is neither sacred nor romanticized. It is a logistical concern, a tactical variable, and above all, a matter to be managed efficiently for the greater good. Among the Tau, the wounded are not symbols of heroism or martyrs to some divine cause. They are assets, living investments of training, technology, and ideology. When damaged, they are repaired. When beyond repair, they are repurposed, but never abandoned without purpose. The Tau treat battlefield medicine with cold precision. Their medical technology, though not as esoteric as that of the Imperium or Mechanicus, is advanced in terms of biomedicine, regenerative therapy, and surgical application. They employ autosurgeons, trauma stasis units, and field nanite kits to stabilize the injured almost instantly. Triage is quick and decisive. Soldiers are patched, sealed, and, if possible, returned to combat. If not, they are transported to well-equipped medbays aboard Mantis or forward command outposts for further care. But the clinical nature of Tau medical systems does not imply cruelty. On the contrary, there is a quiet dignity to how the wounded are handled. They are not chastised for failure, nor made into holy symbols. They are treated as comrades who gave what they could for the greater good, and will continue to give in whatever capacity they are able. For a wounded Tau fire warrior, recovery is not a spiritual trial or moral burden. It is a phase of redirection. An injured marksman may return as a strategist, a communications officer, or a morale advisor. The Empire does not waste minds or experience. There is, however, an emotional sterility to it all. The Tau do not have a concept of trauma in the human sense. Their culture encourages emotional control, and the needs of the individual are always secondary to the collective. As such, psychological wounds are under-acknowledged. Soldiers who survive horrific injuries may return to duty physically whole but mentally eroded. While the Earth caste maintains psychotherapeutic programs, they are utilitarian, focused on ensuring functionality rather than true emotional healing. Tau auxiliary races experience a different fate. The crew, often deployed as shock troops, receive little in the way of advanced medical care. Their physiology is too alien, too mutable. When wounded, they often self-heal through their own genetic quirks or rely on tribal shapers for care. The Tau provide minimal support beyond the battlefield. To the Empire, the Crude are allies, yes, but expendable ones. Vespid, too, are treated more like tools than equals, and their wounded are rarely retrieved unless their loss would jeopardize immediate military goals. Yet even among the Tau themselves, there are darker undertones. Ethereal oversight ensures that only those who remain fully aligned with the greater good are allowed to continue service. Severe injury that results in perceived mental instability or philosophical deviation can result in reassignment, a word that means many things, few of them voluntary. Some wounded never return from medbay. Their fate is unknown, and their names quietly removed from rosters. In the shadows of their bright, idealistic society, the Tau practice a kind of clinical culling, maintaining harmony by removing those who no longer fit the vision. And then there are the Farsight enclaves. Among Farsight's rebels, wounded warriors are treated with fierce loyalty and open reverence. The enclaves lack the full support of the Earthcast infrastructure, but they compensate with camaraderie and improvisation. Field surgeries are brutal but fast. Pain is endured, not for gods or glory, but for each other. A wounded enclave warrior is not merely stabilized. They are honored, kept within the fold, and remembered. There is warmth in their exile, something missing from the core Tau worlds. For the Tau, injury is not a path to transformation. It is a deviation from the plan, a detour in the great architecture of the greater good. It must be corrected, compensated for, or managed. There are no penitent engines, no resurrection protocols, no exaltation through agony. There is only the quiet hum of autosurgery, the sterile recovery pod, and the debriefing room. To be wounded in the Tau Empire is to be seen not as broken, but as temporarily inefficient. And while this may offer a kind of mercy, it also reveals a chilling truth. In a society that values harmony above all, the injured are tolerated only so long as they can be reintegrated without disruption. Compassion exists, but it is always conditional. There is a quiet lie whispered across every battlefield in the galaxy. That injury is the mark of the survivor. That wounds speak of courage. That pain means you lived. But in the grim darkness of the far future, such beliefs are not comfort, they are delusions. There is no mercy for the wounded in Warhammer 40k. No refuge, no healing in the true sense. The injured are not cared for. They are used, repurposed, broken further, or left to rot in the shadow of forgotten wars. Across the factions, Imperium, Xenos, and Chaos alike, injury reveals something far more terrifying than death. Death is an end. Wounds are transformation, into monsters, into machines, into hollow shells of what once was. The guardsman bleeds and is abandoned. The Astartes survives only to become a tool encased in metal. The sister of battle is burned and called holy for it. A tech priest sheds their flesh like scrap. Eldar weep with the soul pain of a shattered psychic echo. Orcs laugh and staple themselves back together, not knowing they should feel shame or fear. Tyranids recycle the fallen like bricks in a living hive. Chaos reshapes pain into mutation. Necrons patch themselves without ever escaping their prison of undeath. And the Tau? Even their mercy is efficient, their compassion wrapped in sterilized bureaucracy. None of these paths offer true peace. None grant dignity. Even those who survive emerge changed in ways that make the word recovery a cruel joke. Limbs may regrow, organs may be replaced, but the person, the will, the soul, the meaning fades with every wound. This is not just a war of attrition, it is a war of erasure. To be injured is to be rewritten, to be made useful again, but never whole. In many ways, the fate of the wounded is the truest reflection of the 41st millennium's horror. It is not the death tolls or the exterminatus orders that define this universe. It is the countless, unnamed, mutilated figures dragged from the fire only to be tossed back in. The wounded remind us that Warhammer 40k is not about victory. It is about endurance. About what remains when all hope, comfort, and humanity have been stripped away. There is no triumph in limping from the wreckage. Only the dread knowledge that tomorrow's war does not care who you were, only whether your broken frame can still hold a gun. The wounded become shadows in a universe of gods and monsters, their screams swallowed by bolter fire, their identities reduced to parts, functions, roles. They are not remembered. They are not cherished. They are reloaded, reassigned, or erased. Perhaps that is the final cruelty of the setting. Not that it kills its people, but that it keeps them alive just long enough to destroy what made them people at all. And yet, in all this darkness, the viewer must ask, why do we look? Why are we drawn to these tales of agony and transformation? Because within the despair there is something powerful, not hope, not redemption, but the brutal, stubborn will to exist anyway, to be wounded and return to the fight, not for glory, but because there is nothing else. Because to falter is to vanish. Because the universe does not care, but you do. And that sliver of meaning, however small, burns bright against the black. So next time you see a scarred guardsman, a limping marine, or a shuddering metal-clad tech adept, remember, they are not survivors. They are sacrifices still walking. Living proof that in the grim darkness of the far future, mercy is not rare. It is extinct. They do not wear armor. They do not wield lasguns or bolt pistols. They are not sworn to chaos or protected by void shields. The wounded masses of Warhammer 40k, the civilians, the laborers, the pilgrims, the press-ganged militia, are invisible to history, and yet they make up the bulk of its blood-stained soil. Every planet, every hive spire, every agri-world is littered with them. And when the galaxy burns, it is they who suffer first and last and longest. For the average citizen of the Imperium, injury is a near constant state. In the hive cities, flesh is cheap and danger is ambient. Machinery crushes bones. Toxic smog burns lungs. Accidents on manufactoria lines are hourly occurrences. And when war comes, and it always comes, it brings with it artillery fire, orbital bombardment, and Xenos atrocities. Civilians are not protected. They are crushed beneath falling hab blocks, irradiated by failing plasma cores, or consumed by tyrannid swarms before the PDF even loads their weapons. Those who survive initial assaults are often maimed in ways no one will ever document. Limbs severed by debris, eyes burned by last-fire glances, spines shattered by collapsing tunnels. If they are lucky, they die quickly. If not, they join the ranks of the half-alive, dragging themselves through the wreckage of their world, hoping someone will help. No one comes. The Imperium does not evacuate civilians. It does not rebuild cities for the broken. It records casualty estimates with the same detachment it uses to log ammunition expenditure. Medical care, if it exists, is rationed and brutal. On war-torn worlds, crude field tents are erected where sanctioned medicae and half-trained orderlies perform butchery with blunt tools. Anesthetic is almost never available. Wound infection is a death sentence. Triage protocols are simple. If you can walk, you will. If you cannot, you will be left. Wailing children are ignored. Mothers with gaping stomach wounds are left to weep and expire. The survival of the fittest isn't a doctrine, it's a logistical necessity. Some seek aid from the ecclesiarchy. Shrine hospitals do exist, run by fervent Sisters Hospitaller or emperor-besotted priests. But aid comes with indoctrination. Wounded are treated with liturgical zeal, often branded with purity seals or subjected to painful acts of spiritual purification. If you confess your sins loudly enough, perhaps the Emperor will spare your ruined flesh. If not, you are declared spiritually tainted and denied assistance. In some cases, the wounded are ritually executed to prevent their spiritual corruption from spreading. Others are press-ganged into the militia, even while wounded. An armless worker might be fitted with a rusted chainsword grafted into their stump and thrown against the enemy in a last-ditch assault. Young boys with chest wounds are handed pistols and told to find courage in the Emperor's name. These are not warriors, they are meat, burnt offerings to a god that no longer listens. In chaos-held systems, the fate of civilians is no kinder. Some are used as breeding stock for demonic rituals. Others are experimented upon, flayed alive, or reshaped into horrifying parodies of life by heretics and warpsmiths. A wounded man in a chaos world does not suffer long. His suffering is made art, his agony made a sermon. The dark gods demand sacrifice, and the broken are offered up again and again until nothing human remains. Xenos-held territories are not havens either. Orc invasions reduce entire populations to paste beneath their crude war machines. The Eldar may spare some, but only if it serves their strange goals, and even then, the psychic toll of encountering their inscrutable will often leaves minds cracked and bodies weakened. Tyranids don't leave wounded, they digest them, and the Necrons? To them, wounded civilians are just anomalies to be processed or annihilated, bugs in a failed system. Only the Tau offer structured civilian medical care during their conquests, and even that care is pragmatic. If you are a human on a world they absorb, you may be treated. Your wounds may be bandaged, but only if your compliance is assured. Only if your faith is broken and your loyalty reassigned. The greater good demands unity. And unity has no room for the rebellious, even if they're bleeding out. But what makes the suffering of the wounded civilians so uniquely tragic in Warhammer 40k is not just the pain, it's the invisibility. These people do not have names. They are never recorded in codex entries or remembered in victory celebrations. No statue is raised in their honor. Their bodies are shoveled into mass graves. Their injuries are forgotten before the battle even ends. Their deaths are just numbers. Thousands, millions, billions, rounded down for the sake of morale. And yet they keep going. The crippled worker still limps to the plasma refinery. The burned refugee still prays. The one-eyed child still carries the ammo crate, because there is no alternative, no sanctuary, only survival, one ruined breath at a time. Their resilience is not heroic, it is not romantic, it is horrific, and it is real. The wounded masses of the galaxy do not fight for gods or empires. They fight because they must. And that, perhaps more than anything, reveals the true face of the far future. Not one of war, but of unending injury. What happens after the wound? After the pain has passed, the blood dried, and the battlefield moved on? In the grim darkness of the far future, healing is rarely the end of the story. It is only the beginning of a new kind of horror. The slow, inevitable erosion of identity that follows survival. Because in Warhammer 40k, to be injured is not only to be hurt. It is to be changed. And change, in this universe, is never merciful. Survivors are not welcomed back with open arms. They are stared at, mistrusted, or forgotten. An Imperial Guard veteran returns to his regiment missing a leg, only to find his name erased from the roll, his bunk reassigned, his comrades already dead. He does not belong. He is not functional. He is a ghost in flak armor. The commissariat eyes him for signs of cowardice. The medicae mutter about servitor conversion. His only hope is to prove he can still shoot, still march, still bleed. If not, he will vanish into the data fog of the Administratum's bureaucracy. A number, not a name. Space Marines fare no better. An Astartes who survives disfigurement may live on, but never as before. The Brotherhood looks at him differently. He is still a warrior, yes, still venerated, but the damage is visible. The scars, the bionics, the absence of a once perfect face or limb, these mark him as a warning. A reminder of what failure costs. Some chapters embrace their wounded as holy relics. Others exile them to solitude, ashamed of their imperfection. The pain has long passed, but the consequences remain etched in ceramite and silence. Among the sororitas, the aftermath is soaked in ritual. A sister who limps, who stares too long into the fire, who doesn't sing quite as loudly during prayer, she is watched, not pitied. Watched. Injury is sanctified, yes, but only so long as it is wielded with fervor. Any sign of hesitation, any glimpse of trauma, is cause for spiritual interrogation. In a cloister where every breath is a hymn, the wounded are expected to scream their devotion louder than the rest. If they do not, they risk isolation, or reassignment to suicide squads. Martyrdom, in the end, may be the only reward for honest weakness. The Mechanicus deals with post-injury adaptation through augmentation, but that too comes with a cost. The more flesh is lost, the more identity is stripped. Some tech priests undergo so many modifications after injuries that they no longer remember their names, their purposes, or even what it once felt like to be human. Function remains. Personality dissolves. The aftermath of their injury is a slow, digitized death, one bite at a time. The Eldar are perhaps the most tragic in their post-injury echoes. A wounded aspect warrior may abandon their path, unable to bear the psychic dissonance of battle. But what path do they take next? Who are they without the mask, without the rituals? Many do not know. Some retreat into silence. Others attempt art or poetry, but find no solace. A few end their lives before Slaanesh can claim them, their wounds not festering in the body, but in the soul. Orcs ignore the aftermath entirely. They don't mourn, they don't adapt. They just keep going, stitched up, bolted together, parts replaced with junk and scrap. But even they are not immune. There are orcs who wander the battlefield after being abandoned, not fighting, not shouting, just dragging rusted limbs through the dust, broken, forgotten. Even in a species that celebrates violence, there are leftovers. Chaos cares even less. The wounded who cannot serve are devoured, mutated, repurposed. But some linger, half-mutated failures, no longer favored by the gods. They were warriors once. Now they are mockeries, their pain eternal, their forms shifting and collapsing into flesh parodies. Their minds, often intact, remain trapped in madness, still remembering what they were, screaming inside rotting shells. Necrons feel nothing, and yet, in the silence of post-injury regeneration, some glitch, some stutter, memories surface. Echoes of who they once were bleed through the repair routines. One moment, a Necron lord looks down at his restored hand and recalls, just for a second, holding a child, a name, a son. And then it's gone, overwritten by targeting data. But the pain remains. It cannot be described, but it is there, deep in the ancient code. After the wound, a flicker of self. Even the Tau, with their structured reintegration, cannot escape the shadows of injury. Reassigned warriors smile through their pain, accept medals, give speeches, and then, behind closed doors, stare at the scars they are told to forget. They are useful, but they are no longer seen. The greater good does not praise them, it uses them, and moves on. Across the galaxy, the aftermath of injury is not a journey toward wholeness. It is a slow subtraction, a quiet diminishing of what once was. Warhammer 40k does not believe in healing. It believes in transformation, and transformation is always violent, always incomplete. The wounded are not survivors, they are remnants. They walk, they breathe, they obey, but something vital is gone. And what remains must pretend it never left. There are those for whom injury is not a curse but a creed. In a universe where gods feed on emotions and dogma shapes reality, pain becomes more than sensation. It becomes language, proof, a demonstration of belief. And so across the stars, entire cults have arisen that sanctify the wound, elevate the mutilated, and forge identities from suffering. Some are imperial, though the High Lords would never admit it. Deep within underhives and voidship cathedrals, there exist sects of the ecclesiarchy who venerate injury as a sign of divine favor. They flagellate themselves daily, carve verses into their flesh, and pray not for safety, but for scars. To them, to be whole is to be untested. It is through damage that one is truly seen by the Emperor. In these cults, the wounded lead the sermons. The more grotesque the wound, the more revered the preacher. Among the redemptionists, such ideas are even more extreme. Wounds inflicted by fire, acid, or self-mutilation are badges of spiritual courage. Followers burn their own eyes out to see the Emperor's light, or sever their tongues to resist heresy. They interpret scripture through pain. The agony is not the price, it is the reward. And when they march to war, they do so as living relics of torment, chanting through ruined throats, limping on shattered limbs, fire in their hands and madness in their hearts. The Adeptus Mechanicus have their own mirror to this theology. Certain Forge worlds revere the blessing of rupture, a quasi-mystical belief that true machine perfection only comes after catastrophic failure. Tech priests who survive critical injury during experimentation are not shamed. They are exalted. They are allowed to retain their scorched limbs, their shattered optics, as sacred testaments to machine fallibility and divine challenge. Some even design rituals of intentional damage, placing unstable plasma cores near their hearts to prove their resolve. These cults believe the Omnissiah only whispers to those who have bled sparks. But it is not only the Imperium that embraces the sanctification of suffering. Chaos, unsurprisingly, births entire religions from pain. The cults of the Shattered Star believe that every injury is a fragment of prophecy, that every scar is a map to ascension. Their high priests are walking horrors, skin flens to reveal pulsing glyphs beneath. Initiates willingly mutilate themselves to decode their destinies, allowing demons to read their flesh like parchment. Their rituals involve coordinated mutilations, often to the beat of drumming bones, each cut guided by corrupted scripture. Those who survive are often no longer recognizably human, but are elevated to leadership as living prophecies of pain. There are whisperings of the pain choirs, chaos-warped cults that inflict music through torture. Their wounded do not scream, they sing. Their flesh is pierced with strings, their bones used as tuning forks. Every injury is tuned to pitch. Every broken rib resonates with harmony. They believe the gods listen more closely when suffering carries melody. It is said that to hear the full choir is to weep blood, as your own nerves are tuned in resonance. Their most injured are called soloists, and their songs are apocalyptic. Even among the Eldar, some paths flirt with this theology. The masks of the Harlequins sometimes stage dances that depict injury as a spiritual necessity. Performers slice themselves mid-performance, believing each act of bloodletting heightens the psychic resonance of the tale. They see wounds as sacred punctuation in a story older than worlds. The Dance Without End is a piece known to have killed its performers, not through violence inflicted by others, but through the ritualistic precision of their own self-sacrifice. The Drakari take this to its inevitable, grotesque extreme. Among the Homunculi covens, the cult of the wound is not merely religion, it is industry. Wounds are sculpted, pain is a canvas, victims are flayed and reassembled in temples of bone and viscera, each injury a prayer to the dark muses of Kamara. A homunculus does not waste pain, it refines it. Every scar inflicted is recorded, every scream catalogued. Their prophets are the most mutilated of all, being so warped by ritual surgery that they are living altars, brimming with centuries of agony made flesh. Some Freeblade Knights bear the Wound Creed, a secretive belief that their scars reflect the machine spirit's displeasure or guidance. A Knight pilot might purposefully drive their throne into injury, fusing their nervous system with raw cabling to hear the true voice of the throne mechanicum. These warriors become increasingly unstable, often painting their armor with depictions of their wounds. Their oaths are etched not on parchment, but carved into their own skin with monomolecular knives. In the fringe zones of Tau-held space, Gravesa mercenaries have begun forming underground sects, where scars are worn as proof of individuality. A quiet rebellion against the uniformity of the greater good. These humans decorate their injuries with ink and metal, claiming each one as an act of liberation. They chant, "I bled, therefore I am," a phrase quietly banned in Tau academic centers. The ethereals do not tolerate such expressions of personal pain, for they know that pain remembered is identity reclaimed. Even among orcs, there are warbands that view injury as a challenge from Gork and Mork. Knobs duel for scars. Weird boys mark their psychic evolution by the burns they sustain. The biggest bosses? They're often the most mutilated, proudly displaying metal jaws, augmetic skulls, and limbs replaced with crude saws. The pain doesn't stop them, it defines them. In Warhammer 40k, wounds are more than damage. They are banners, sermons, blueprints. To bleed is to matter. To scar is to speak. And in a galaxy where gods walk among the stars, some believe pain is the only true language left. The cult of the wounded thrives because it offers meaning to the meaningless. In a world of endless suffering, it dares to say, "This hurts, therefore it matters." And in a universe that devours souls by the trillion, even that fragile truth can become a religion. If this glimpse into the darkest corners of the galaxy stirred something in you, if you felt the tragedy, the rage, or the quiet horror, subscribe. Join us for more journeys into the black heart of Warhammer 40k. The Emperor may not care, but we do.